Get out! This house is ours! The words dripped from her mouth like pure poison. She spat on me without a single touch, but the damage was worse than any physical blow. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd tell anyone. And if you, for a single second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me keep unburdening myself. It was an October afternoon in Boston, the kind where the sky turns the color of lead and threatens to cry at any moment. I was in the kitchen of what I thought was my house, hands damp with soapy water, finishing the breakfast dishes. The blue apron my son Ryan bought me for Mother's Day 3 years ago hung loosely over the gray dress I wear for chores. Jessica came in, dragging her flip-flops across the marble floor. She was 7 months pregnant with an attitude that had been cutting my soul to shreds for months. Her pink silk robe opened slightly over her round belly, and her phone was glued to her right hand as if it were a life support machine. "Teresa," she said, without even looking me in the eye. "We need to talk." Something in her tone froze my blood. It wasn't the first time she'd spoken to me like I was the hired help, but this time there was a different coldness, more calculated, more cruel. "What is it, sweetie?" I replied, drying my hands on the hand-embroidered dish towel I brought from my old place. That place where I lived for 30 years, where I raised Ryan by myself after his father left us when he was 8. Jessica leaned against the granite countertop, the one I helped pay for when they got married 2 years ago. Her perfectly manicured pale pink nails tapped against the cold surface. "This house is getting a little tight with the baby on the way," she began, speaking as if she were discussing the lunch menu. "Ryan and I have been thinking, and we think it would be better if you found another place to live." The words took a moment to register. Find another place? I, who sold my condo in the North End. That place with a wrought iron balcony where I hung red geraniums every spring, where Ryan took his first steps, where I kept every drawing he ever made for me in school. I sold it to help them with the down payment on this house in Weston, with its 4 bedrooms and a backyard where I planted rose bushes myself. "What do you mean, find another place?" I murmured, feeling my legs tremble. "Jessica, this is my home too." That's when it happened. When my world collapsed with a single sentence. "Get out! This house is ours!" she yelled, though without raising her voice too much, with that elegant cruelty she had perfected. "I don't want some bitter old woman breathing near my baby. You're already in the way enough as it is." She spat the words at me as if I were a cockroach in her perfect kitchen. My kitchen. The kitchen where I'd prepared hundreds of dinners for her and my son, where I baked the lemon pound cake she loved so much when they started dating, where I washed the baby clothes they bought last month, which I folded myself with love, imagining my future grandchild. The dish towel slipped from my hands and landed on the floor with a soft thud that seemed to echo like thunder in the ensuing silence. "Jessica?" I tried to speak, but my voice broke. "No, Jessica." She cut me off, placing a protective hand on her belly. "We've decided. Ryan agrees. This house is for our family. For the real family." Real family? I, who cleaned up her vomit when she had the flu, who took care of her when Ryan traveled for work, who bought her prenatal vitamins with my Social Security check when they forgot. Wasn't that a real family? I heard Ryan's footsteps coming down the wooden stairs. My only son, my reason for living for 50 years. The boy I held in my arms when he cried from nightmares, whom I defended from bullies at school, whom I applauded at every graduation, every achievement, every small victory. He walked into the kitchen looking worried, but when he saw the scene, me, pale as a sheet, Jessica with her arms crossed and a defiant expression, he sighed as if he'd rather be anywhere else. "Mom," he said, unable to look me in the eye, staring at his brown leather shoes. "It's for the best. You don't fit here anymore." Those 6 words pierced my chest like a sword. You don't fit here anymore. I, who for 2 years had lived in the back room, the one that was originally a storage closet, and that I had turned into my little sanctuary with the few pieces of furniture I'd saved, my photos in cheap frames, my bedside lamp from my old bedroom. "And where am I supposed to go?" I asked, and my voice sounded so small it made me want to disappear. Ryan shrugged and mumbled something about assisted living facilities and government aid. Jessica, however, was more direct. "That's not our problem, ma'am. I was no longer Teresa, the mother-in-law who cooked his favorite meals on Sundays. I was no longer Teresa, the woman who had sacrificed her entire life for the son who was now turning his back on me. I was ma'am, as if I were a stranger who had invaded their perfect home. I just stood there. In the middle of the kitchen I had cleaned 1,000 times, feeling everything I thought I knew about unconditional love, about family, about a mother's place in her children's lives, crumble. Outside, it started to rain, and the drops against the window sounded like the beating of my broken heart. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my narrow bed, in that windowless room that smelled of dampness and cleaning products, replaying every sacrifice I had made for them over these past 2 years. I remembered the day I sold my condo in the North End, 800 square feet that I bought with the severance pay I got when the textile factory where I worked for 25 years shut down. It was small, yes, but it was mine. The walls were painted a color I chose, a soft yellow that made the morning light pour in like honey through the balcony. I had plants in every corner, pothos hanging from the ceiling, a fiddle-leaf fig in a large pot by the window, red geraniums on the balcony that reminded me of my mother's house in North Carolina. I sold it for $450,000. All of it, every last cent, went straight to the down payment on this house in Weston. "So we'll have more space, Mom," Ryan had told me with that smile he inherited from me, the one that always disarmed me. "So we can all be together like a real family. A real family." What a bitter irony. For these past 2 years, I had been the unpaid housekeeper for my own investment. I would get up at 6 in the morning to make breakfast. Avocado toast with everything bagel seasoning for Ryan, because he said it helped him focus at work. A green smoothie with protein powder for Jessica, because she read online it was good for her skin during pregnancy. Coffee with milk for both, served in the white porcelain mugs we bought together at Crate and Barrel the first month we lived here. I cleaned the bathrooms every other day because Jessica complained that the smells made her nauseous with the pregnancy. I vacuumed the Persian rugs she chose, the ones that cost more than my Social Security check for 3 months. I ironed Ryan's shirts because the ones from the dry cleaner just aren't the same. I cooked dinner every night, homemade pizza on Fridays because it was a family tradition, though I had invented the tradition to make them happy. On Sundays, I did a deep clean of the entire house. I waxed the hardwood floors, cleaned the windows until they sparkled, dusted every surface until not a single speck remained. Ryan and Jessica used those Sundays to go out to expensive restaurants, the kind they never invited me to because they needed couple time. I stayed home, cleaning up their intimacy, tidying up their happiness, while they built memories without me. When Jessica's pregnancy cravings started, I would run to Whole Foods to get whatever she wanted. Pistachio ice cream at 11 at night, strawberries in the middle of winter that cost $8 a pound, Belgian chocolate she demanded on a whim, and then left to half melt in the fridge. I paid for it all with my check. $950 a month that evaporated between their whims and the household bills, which, of course, were in Ryan's name, but which I helped pay for temporarily. "Just until I get organized at work, Mom," he'd say every month when I gave him my share. "You know how things are." And I would nod, because a mother always finds a way to justify her children's abuses. Because I believed it was temporary, that soon they would value me, that the coming baby would give me a permanent place in this family I had financed myself. I got up from the bed and walked to the small built-in closet where I kept my things. I took out the shoebox where I had the receipts for all my loans to them, utility bills I paid when they forgot, grocery receipts from the big shopping trips I made every 2 weeks, pharmacy receipts for the prenatal vitamins, the folic acid, the stretch mark creams Jessica used religiously. $23,000. I had calculated and recalculated that figure for months, every time I ran out of money for my own expenses and had to choose between buying new shoes or contributing once again to their well-being. $23,000 of my money, my life savings, my retirement, which had vanished into this house where I was now treated like an intruder. I remembered last Christmas. Jessica had insisted on hosting a family dinner and invited her parents from Florida. I cooked for 2 days. Roast turkey with mashed potatoes and gravy, green bean casserole, and a pumpkin pie for dessert made from my grandmother's recipe. I set the table with the linen tablecloth I inherited from my mother and took out the good china I had saved for special occasions. Throughout the dinner, Jessica's parents treated me like I was the caterer. They'd ask for more wine without looking at me, making comments about how convenient it must be for me to not have to worry about anything at my age. Ryan didn't say a word to defend me. Jessica smiled with satisfaction every time her parents made one of those remarks that reduced me to some kind of domestic pet, tolerated out of charity. After dinner, as I washed dishes until 2 in the morning, I overheard Jessica on the phone with her sister. Yeah, she's here. All the time. It's suffocating. I can't even go to the bathroom without her asking if I need something. Ryan says it's temporary, but I don't know how much longer I can take it. Temporary. Everything in my life was temporary, according to them. My presence in the house I helped buy was temporary. My financial contributions were temporary. My place in their lives was temporary. But the sacrifices they demanded were permanent. I also remembered the day Jessica had a pregnancy scare when she started bleeding a little in the 5th month. Ryan was in Chicago for an architecture conference, and she called me from the bathroom, crying, scared, and trembling. "Teresa, please, come. I'm scared." I dropped everything I was doing. I was making lentil soup for the week, and ran to her side. I took her to Mass General Hospital, stayed with her in the emergency room for 6 hours until the doctor confirmed everything was fine, just a minor issue of no consequence. I held her as she cried with relief, stroking her hair like I did with Ryan when he was little and had nightmares. I promised her I would always be there for her and my future grandchild. "Thank you, Teresa," she had said that night, her eyes red from crying. "I don't know what I'd do without you." A lie. It had all been a lie, because now, 2 months later, the same woman who had trembled in my arms was kicking me out of the house as if I were an annoying stranger. I took out my old phone, a Samsung that Ryan gave me 3 years ago because he couldn't have me being out of touch, and dialed his number. I needed to hear from his own mouth that this was real, that my only son agreed with throwing me out onto the street at 62. "Mom?" He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice sounding tired. "Ryan, is what Jessica told me true? Do you really want me to leave?" There was a long pause. I heard the background noise of his office, the voices of his fellow architects, the typing of keyboards, the sounds of a professional life unfolding normally while mine fell apart. "Mom?" He sighed. "It's complicated. Jessica is very sensitive with the pregnancy. She says she feels watched all the time, that she can't relax in her own home. Her own home. Not our home. Her home. Ryan, I sold my condo to help you," I reminded him, feeling my voice crack. "I have nowhere to go." "I know, Mom, and we're very grateful. But it had to be temporary, you understand? Just until we get organized with the baby. Temporary. That word again. Everything I gave was permanent. Everything they gave me was temporary. And in the meantime, where am I supposed to live? You can look for a small apartment to rent. Something small, manageable. You can easily afford it with your Social Security check. My check. $950 that turned into $700 after helping them with household expenses each month. With that, I was supposed to find a rental in the Boston area, where the cheapest apartments cost $1,500 a month, not including a security deposit and broker fees. "Ryan, I don't have the money." "Mom, please, don't make this any harder. Jessica is stressed enough as it is." And he hung up. My own son hung up on me because his wife was stressed. I sat on the floor of my room, my back against the cold wall, and for the first time in 2 years, I let myself truly cry. Not the silent cry I had learned to master so as not to bother anyone, but the deep, gut-wrenching sobs of someone who has just realized they've been living a lie. I had raised a son who was capable of throwing me out to please a woman who despised me. I had invested my entire life in someone who saw me as an old piece of furniture that no longer matched his new decor. That night, as the rain beat against the roof and they slept peacefully in the master bedroom, the one with the ensuite bathroom and windows overlooking the garden, I began to plan something. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew I was done being the silent victim of my own generosity. The following days were a quiet torture. Jessica had decided my presence was so annoying that she no longer even feigned politeness. When I entered a room, she left. If I was watching TV in the living room, she would stomp upstairs, shaking the whole house. But the worst part wasn't her open contempt. It was Ryan's calculated indifference. My son had learned to look at me as if I were invisible, to speak of me in the third person even when I was right there. "Has she eaten yet?" he would ask Jessica in the kitchen, referring to me as if I were a pet. "I don't know. I don't pay attention to what she does," she would reply without looking up from her phone. I was there, 6 feet away, quietly making my chamomile tea, pretending not to hear them planning my removal from their lives. One morning while cleaning the master bathroom, because even though they despised me, they still expected me to keep the house immaculate, I found something that chilled me to the bone. In the trash can, crumpled but legible, was a brochure for St. Joseph's Residence, one of those places on the outskirts of the city where they put elderly people their families no longer want around. The brochure had notes in Ryan's handwriting. Monthly cost, $4,200. Waiting list, 3 months. Includes meals and nursing. My own son was researching where to dump me like a piece of old furniture he no longer had a use for. And the cruelest part was that the price of the residence was more than 4 times my entire Social Security check. They expected me to pay for my own exile. That afternoon, when I went out to get groceries at the market basket, I decided to take a detour. I drove to the north end, to my old street, and stood in front of the building where I had lived for 30 years of my life. The new tenant had put up blue curtains on my balcony. My red geraniums were gone. There was a bicycle hanging where I used to hang my laundry on Saturday mornings, when the sun was warm enough to dry the sheets that smelled of lavender softener. A young woman came out of the entrance. She must have been about 30, with her hair in a high ponytail and a backpack over her shoulder. She looked happy, as I had been in that home, as I could still be if I hadn't made the mistake of trusting that blood was a guarantee of loyalty. I returned to Weston with a heavier heart than ever. As I walked through the door, I heard voices from the living room. Jessica was on the phone with her mother. "Yes, Mom, she's still here. Ryan doesn't have the guts to say anything final. She's just so manipulative, always with that victim face. As if we owe her something. No, I can't take it anymore. With the baby coming, I need peace in my house. My house. The house I helped buy. The house where I had invested not only money, but dreams, hopes, the naive idea that a mother's love was naturally reciprocated. I stood in the hallway, listening to them describe me as a burden, a nuisance, a toxic presence in their perfect lives. Every word was a silent stab, but also a revelation. I was finally seeing the truth without the filter of self-deception that had protected me for 2 years. That night at dinner, lentil soup with sausage that I had cooked, because it had been Ryan's favorite dish since he was a child, I decided to run a test. One last chance to confirm what I already knew but didn't want to accept. "Kids," I said, using the gentle tone that had always worked to start difficult conversations. "Do you remember that next month is my birthday?" Ryan looked up from his plate for the first time in weeks. Jessica continued to stir her lentils with a bored expression. "Your birthday's in November, right?" he said. And the fact that he had to ask confirmed I was no longer a priority in his memory. "The 15th. I'll be 63, I reminded them. "I was thinking we could celebrate here, like we used to. Maybe invite a few neighbors. Make a big pot of chili." "Mom," Ryan interrupted, "with Jessica's pregnancy, I don't think it's a good idea to have a party. She needs to rest." Jessica looked up for the first time and stared directly at me. "Besides, parties at the house give me anxiety. The smells, the noise. It's not good for the baby, my birthday. The day I was brought into this world 62 years ago was bad for the baby, who hadn't even been born yet." "I understand," I murmured, feeling something harden in my chest. "No problem." But there was a problem. A huge problem that had been brewing for months and had just crystallized at this dinner table where we were eating the meal I had prepared, in the house I had helped buy, surrounded by people who considered me disposable. After dinner, like every night, I cleared the table and washed the dishes. Ryan went to his study to work on his architectural projects. Jessica went upstairs to watch shows in bed, her feet propped up because her ankles were swollen. I was left alone in the kitchen, drying the dishes with automatic movements I had repeated thousands of times. But this time, as I put each plate away, as I wiped the countertop until it shone, as I organized everything in its perfect place, I made a decision. I would no longer be the servant of my own generosity. I would no longer pay for the privilege of being despised in the house I helped secure. I went up to my room and took out my old tablet, the one Ryan gave me years ago when he decided I needed to get with the times. I looked up the number for Hugo Vance, the real estate developer I had met weeks ago at a cafe in Beacon Hill, where I went to drink coffee just to get out of the house and feel human again. Hugo had told me about his urban revitalization projects, about how he was looking for properties in established residential areas for modern housing developments. He had given me his card with a sincere smile, saying he always needed local people with knowledge of the area. At the time, I thought he was just being kind to an old woman drinking coffee alone. Now I realized that perhaps he had seen something in me that I had forgotten I had. Value. I wrote a text message. "Hi, Hugo. It's Teresa, the lady from the cafe in Beacon Hill. Are you still interested in properties in Weston? I have some information that might interest you." I sent it before fear could make me change my mind. The reply came 5 minutes later. "Teresa, of course I remember you. Can we meet tomorrow? I'm very interested." For the first time in months, I smiled. Not the forced smile I put on to keep Ryan and Jessica from feeling guilty about treating me poorly, but a real, dangerous smile, full of possibilities they couldn't imagine. Because it turns out that when you treat someone like garbage for too long, that person might decide they have nothing left to lose. And a woman with nothing to lose can be far more dangerous than a spoiled 30-something couple could ever comprehend. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. I dreamed of my old condo in the North End, but in the dream, I held the keys to many more houses. The next day, Hugo met me at an elegant cafe on Newbury Street, one of those places where the cups cost more than my lunch for a whole week. I arrived early, nervous, wearing my best dress, the navy blue one I bought for Ryan's wedding and had since only worn for special occasions that never came. Hugo was a man in his 50s, with perfectly styled gray hair and a smile that inspired confidence. He wore an impeccable gray suit and leather shoes that gleamed under the cafe lights. When he saw me walk in, he stood up immediately, kissed my hand with an old-fashioned courtesy almost no one practiced anymore, and pulled out my chair before I sat down. It had been so long since anyone had treated me like a lady that I almost burst into tears right there. "Teresa, you look wonderful," he said with sincerity. "Tell me, how can I help you?" I explained everything. My situation, the house in Weston, the problems I knew better than anyone because I had been the one handling its maintenance for 2 years. I told him about the leaks in the basement that Ryan was always going to fix tomorrow, the cracks in the back wall that appeared every winter, the problems with the electrical system that tripped the circuit breaker whenever they used too many appliances. Hugo took notes in a leather-bound notebook, asking specific questions that showed he knew his business. "And the paperwork? Is everything in order?" he asked. That's when I told him about the illegal conversion of the storage closet into a bedroom, how Ryan had knocked down a wall without town permits to make my room, how he had never declared the renovation to the Weston Town Hall, how I had been living in a space that technically didn't exist according to the official floor plans. Hugo's eyes lit up. "Teresa, do you know what you've just told me? That information is gold. In my hands, that house could face serious legal trouble, or it could become a very lucrative business opportunity." He offered me a job on the spot. $500 a month to be his local consultant in the Weston area. To get to know every property, every problem, every neighbor who might be willing to sell. "But Teresa," he said, leaning forward with a serious expression, "this means you can no longer be neutral. If you work with me, you'll be on the other side, the other side. For the first time in my life, I was going to be on the side of those with power instead of the side of those who suffer from it." "I accept," I said without hesitation. That afternoon, I returned to the house with a work contract in my purse and a strange feeling in my chest. It was as if I had been holding my breath for years and had finally been able to exhale. Jessica was in the living room, lying on the gray sofa we had chosen together that first month, watching one of those reality shows where rich people argued about problems the poor would never have. She had a bowl of marinated olives on her lap, the kind that cost $12 a pound at Whole Foods, and that I bought because they agreed with her pregnancy. Where have you been?" she asked without looking at me, in the tone she would use to interrogate a suspicious housekeeper. "Having coffee," I replied simply. "Oh, well, we're out of milk, and there's no bread for tomorrow. We also need more of those whole wheat crackers I like." It was an order disguised as information, as always. I was expected to run to the store so her whims would be satisfied before she had to experience the mild discomfort of not having exactly what she wanted when she wanted it. "I can't today," I said, and my own voice surprised me with how firm it sounded. "I have other things to do." Jessica turned her head so fast I thought she'd hurt her neck. "What do you mean you can't? What's more important than making sure we have what we need in this house?" "My life," I answered, and for the first time in 2 years, I felt I was saying something completely honest. She struggled to sit up on the sofa, placing a hand on her back with a dramatic gesture. "I can't believe how selfish you are, Teresa. I'm pregnant. I can't carry heavy bags, and you refuse to help." Before, that accusation of selfishness would have destroyed me. It would have sent me running to the store with apologies on my lips and promises to be better. But now, with Hugo's contract in my purse, and the certainty that I had other options, the word selfish sounded different. "You're right," I said with a smile that confused her. "I am selfish. For the first time in 63 years, I'm going to be selfish." That evening, Ryan came home from work looking worried. Jessica had been calling him all afternoon, telling him about my strange attitude and my refusal to cooperate. "Mom, can we talk?" he said, peeking into my room. I was sitting on my bed, reading a book I had bought that morning after my coffee with Hugo. Women Who Run with the Wolves, by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. A neighbor from my old street had recommended it to me years ago, but I never had time to read it because I was always busy taking care of others. "Of course, son." "What is it?" He sat in the only chair in my room, a white plastic one they had put there because the good chairs were in the dining room for important guests. "Jessica says you're acting weird, that you don't want to help with things around the house." "That's right," I confirmed. "I'm no longer going to do the shopping automatically, or the daily cleaning, or cook every night." "But Mom," he began, with that confused little boy expression he got when things didn't go his way. "You've always done that. It's your way of contributing since..." "Since what, Ryan?" "Since you don't pay rent." He finished the sentence as if it were obvious. There it was. The naked truth. According to my son, my financial contribution of $23,000 had evaporated. Now I was a burden who paid for her right to exist with free domestic labor. "Ryan," I said, closing my book and looking him directly in the eye, "do you think I've been happy these past 2 years?" The question caught him by surprise. He blinked several times as if it had never occurred to him that my emotional state was relevant. "Well, of course. You're with family. You have a roof over your head. You eat well. You eat well." As if I were a stray dog they had taken in. "And you? Have you been happy with me here?" This time, he took longer to answer. I saw him torn between a white lie and the cruel truth. "Mom, it's complicated. Jessica feels watched. She says she can't relax in her own home." "Her own home?" That phrase again. I said, "So, what are you proposing?" "Well, we've been looking at options. There are some very nice assisted living facilities with activities for people your age. You could make friends, have your independence, assisted living." He was selling my own exile as if it were a vacation package. "And who's going to pay for that, Ryan?" He shifted uncomfortably in the plastic chair. "Well, with your Social Security check and maybe a little help from us." "How much is this little help?" About $200 a month, maybe $300 if needed. $300. To get rid of me forever? They were willing to pay $300 a month, less than what they spent on dinner out every weekend. "All right," I said, and his face lit up with relief. "But I'm not going to any facility. Then, I'm going to find my own apartment. I want to live alone." "But Mom, With your check, you can't afford. I'll figure it out, son. Just like I've figured everything out my entire life. Ryan left my room visibly relieved. He had fulfilled his duty to talk to me, and I had given him the answer he wanted to hear. He thought he had won. He had no idea what was coming. The next morning, Hugo sent me a message. Teresa, I've got news. Can we meet today? This time we met at his office, a modern space in Boston's financial district, with enormous windows overlooking the entire city. From up there, Weston looked small and manageable, like a chessboard where the pieces could be moved according to the player's strategy. Teresa, I've been researching your area, he said, spreading some blueprints over his glass desk. It's perfect for what we have in mind. Single-family homes, good transport links, young owners who probably have high mortgages. And what does that mean? That they're vulnerable. That if we offer them the right price at the right time, they'll sell. And you, my dear Teresa, are going to help me find that right time. I looked at the blueprints, the red marks indicating properties of interest, the notes in the margins about market values and development potential. One of those red marks was exactly over the house where Ryan and Jessica were planning to raise their child far away from me. When do I start? I asked. Hugo smiled as if he had been waiting for that question his whole life. My first day as a real estate consultant began with something I hadn't felt in years: purpose. Hugo had given me a new tablet, a company phone, and a navy blue blazer that made me feel professional. For the first time in decades, I had a business card with my name on it. Teresa Morales, Senior Acquisitions Consultant. I walked through Weston with new eyes, no longer as the invisible woman who did her shopping in silence, but as someone who had valuable information and the power to use it. Every house told me a story. Unpayable mortgages, marriages in crisis, retirees who couldn't maintain oversized yards. Mrs. Martinez from number 47 confided in me that her husband had lost his job and they were falling behind on payments. The young couple at 52 argued about money every night. I had heard them from the street during my lonely walks. The widow at 61 had mentioned at Market Basket that the house felt too big since her husband passed away. Information, power, revenge disguised as a job. When I got home that afternoon, loaded with folders and official documents, Jessica was waiting for me at the door with a funereal look on her face. "Where have you been all day?" she yelled from the sofa, her hand resting dramatically on her forehead. "I've been feeling sick all morning, and there was no one here to help me." "Working," I replied simply, hanging my new blazer on the coat rack in the entryway. "Working? You?" She laughed with that cruel laugh she had perfected. "Who would hire a woman your age?" I showed her my business card. She read it twice, as if the words would magically change. Acquisitions? Consultant? What is this? Real estate. Urban development. Things you wouldn't understand. Her expression shifted from mockery to concern in seconds. For the first time since I'd known her, she seemed unsure of herself. And what exactly do you do?" "I evaluate properties for companies that want to buy them," I explained with a sweet smile. "I look for houses with problems, vulnerable owners, acquisition opportunities." I saw the color drain from her cheeks. She wasn't stupid. She understood the implications. Ryan arrived at 9, as usual, tired from work and hungry. He went straight to the kitchen, expecting to find dinner ready like every day for the past 2 years. Instead, he found a cold stove and his wife sitting at the kitchen table with a panicked look on her face. "No dinner?" he asked, looking at me in confusion. "No," I answered from my chair, where I was reviewing documents from the Registry of Deeds on my new tablet. "I worked late today." "You worked?" he repeated, as if I had said I'd flown to the moon. Jessica showed him my card. I watched him read it, reread it, and swallow hard. "Mom, what is this?" "My new job, son. I'm financially independent now. And what kind of properties do you evaluate?" The fear-laden question gave me a satisfaction I had never felt before. "Oh, mostly in this area. Weston is very attractive for urban development. Large houses, young families with high mortgages, lots of potential for redevelopment." I saw them look at each other. That silent exchange of panic that only couples who share secrets can understand. "Mom, Ryan sat down across from me with that scared child look he used to get when he'd broken something and hoped I would fix it. Are we on your list? My list of what, son? Of houses with problems. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Not the fake smile I had used for years to keep the peace, but a real smile, full of knowledge and possibilities. Well, technically, this house does have some structural issues and some paperwork problems. But don't worry, I said, gathering my papers. For now, I'm just in an observation period. That night, they ate cereal with milk because they had no idea how a kitchen worked without me. I heard them arguing in whispers from my room, and every word was music to my ears. The next day, Jessica tried a different approach. She approached me while I was having breakfast, toast with jam that I had bought for myself with my money, and sat down with a look of feigned remorse. Teresa, I think you misunderstood me the other day. I didn't misunderstand anything, Jessica. You told me to get out because this house was yours, that you didn't want a bitter old woman near your baby. I was nervous. The pregnancy has me on edge. I didn't mean it. Oh, you didn't? I feigned surprise. So you do want me to stay? Of course, you're family. Family. How quickly I had become family again now that I had a job and business contacts. That's good to know, I said, finishing my coffee. Because yesterday my boss asked if I knew of any properties in the area with construction irregularities. I told him I couldn't think of any. I watched her swallow. Her hands, which were always perfectly manicured, trembled slightly as she lifted her cup to her lips. Irregularities? Yes. Additions without permits. Illegal conversions of spaces. The kind of things that can lead to serious trouble with the town. She stood up quickly, mumbling something about morning sickness, but I knew it wasn't nausea. It was pure fear. That afternoon, while I was out evaluating properties for Hugo, I ran into Donna, my old neighbor from the North End. She was getting off the T in Weston loaded with shopping bags. Teresa, she shouted with genuine joy. What are you doing out here? You look fantastic. It had been months since anyone had told me I looked good. At Ryan's house, I was either invisible or a nuisance, never someone worthy of a compliment. I live here now, Donna, with my son. That's wonderful. You always said you wanted to be close to him. So how are you doing? For the first time in months, someone asked how I was doing. Not how Jessica's pregnancy was going, or how Ryan's job was, or how the baby preparations were coming along. Someone wanted to know how Teresa was. Very well, I said, and was surprised to realize it was true. In fact, I've started working again. Really? That's brave. At our age, reinventing yourself isn't easy. Our age, not your age, as if it were a burden. Our age, as if we were partners in the adventure of aging with dignity. I told her about my job with Hugo, about the properties I was evaluating, about the financial independence I had regained. Donna listened with genuine admiration, something I hadn't experienced in so long I'd almost forgotten how to receive it. Teresa, I'm so happy to see you like this. We miss you in the North End. The new tenant in your old place is nice, but she's not like you. She doesn't take care of the courtyard plants like you did. When we said goodbye, Donna hugged me with the real affection of someone who had known me when I still had self-esteem. The hug lasted longer than usual, as if we both needed a reminder that affection without conditions, without blame, without invoices to be paid, still existed. I returned home feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Self-worth. Ryan and Jessica were in the living room with serious expressions and a laptop open between them. When they saw me enter, they quickly closed the screen. Everything okay? I asked with false innocence. Yes, Mom. Just reviewing some things. Some things. Probably researching building codes, town permits, the consequences of having illegal renovations on a property. That night, for the first time in 2 years, I didn't cook. I made myself a cheese omelet and ate it while reading my book in the peace of my room. Outside, I could hear Ryan and Jessica arguing about what to order for dinner, as if it were the most complicated decision in the world. They had no idea how to function without me, and I was starting to discover how I functioned without them. It was liberating. Terribly, wonderfully liberating. A week later, Hugo called me into his office urgently. When I arrived, he had a smile that didn't bode well for my dear relatives. Teresa, I have extraordinary news, he said, pointing to a thick folder on his desk. I've been looking into the history of your house, and it turns out there are more irregularities than we thought. He opened the folder and spread out official documents from the Weston Town Hall, property plans from the Registry of Deeds, building permits that were never requested. The conversion of the storage room isn't the only thing, he continued, turning pages with a satisfied look. They also extended the back porch without a permit, and that wooden pergola they built last year isn't declared either. My heart started to beat faster. I remembered that pergola perfectly. Ryan had been so proud of building it himself over a long weekend, sweating under the July sun while Jessica directed him from a garden chair, with a fan in one hand and a glass of rosé in the other. Is that serious? I asked, though I already knew the answer from Hugo's expression. Very serious. We're talking about fines that could reach $40,000. And that's just the beginning. If the town decides to be strict, they could order the demolition of all unauthorized additions. $40,000. A figure that was more money than Ryan and Jessica had ever saved. A figure that could destroy their perfect finances, their plans for an ideal family, their rose-colored future. And what can we do with this information? I asked, feeling a mix of fear and excitement I had never experienced before. Well, Hugo leaned back in his leather chair. There are several options. We could file an anonymous complaint with the town, or we could wait for them to discover the problems themselves when they survey the area for the new urban development we're proposing. Or we could offer them an elegant way out. Buy the house from them at a fair price before the legal issues become public. It would almost be an act of charity. The irony was delicious. I, the annoying old woman, could become their financial savior. For a price, of course. That afternoon, I returned home with a sense of power that made me walk differently. My back was straighter, my steps were firmer. My head was held high for the first time in years. Jessica was in the living room, watching TV with the volume up. When she saw me walk in, she made a face of disgust. "You're finally home. There was no one to help me bring in the groceries." "Oh," I said with feigned concern. "Did you buy a lot?" "Not much, just the basics." But it was heavy, and with the pregnancy, I can't overexert myself. I glanced at the Whole Foods bags dumped by the door. Expensive products, as always. Norwegian salmon, French cheeses, a red wine that cost more than my daily pension. Luxuries they had come to consider basics. And where's Ryan? At work, obviously. Some of us have important responsibilities. The dig was direct. I did not have important responsibilities. Even though now, technically, I controlled the future of her house. "You're right," I said, sitting on the sofa without making a move to touch the bags. Some of us do have important responsibilities. The hours passed. Jessica continued to watch TV, waiting for me to give in and bring in her groceries. I continued to review documents on my tablet, pretending not to notice her silent war. At 8 o'clock, Ryan arrived and found the bags exactly where Jessica had left them. "Why are the groceries still here?" he asked. "Ask your mother," Jessica answered with venom. "Apparently she's too important to help around her house now." Ryan looked at me with an expression I knew from his childhood. Confusion mixed with blame. It was the same face he made when I told him we couldn't afford something he wanted, when economic reality clashed with his expectations. "Mom, can you explain what's going on?" "Of course, son. I got a job. A good job. I'm no longer financially dependent on anyone. That's great," he stammered. "But that doesn't mean you can stop contributing at home." There it was again. The expectation that I would give everything and receive scraps. That my financial independence didn't buy me emotional or domestic independence. Contributing at home? I repeated slowly. "Last week, Jessica told me to get out. That this house was yours. That I was in the way. Now you want my contribution again?" Ryan looked at his wife with reproach. Jessica shifted uncomfortably on the sofa, placing a hand on her belly, as she always did to avoid confrontation. "That was a misunderstanding," she mumbled. I was upset. "It didn't seem like a misunderstanding to me," I insisted. "It seemed very clear. So clear that I started looking for alternatives." "What kind of alternatives?" Ryan asked, his voice trembling slightly. "A job. Independence. the possibility of living without being treated like a bothersome burden. But Mom, we never… Ryan… I cut him off, using the firm tone I used when he was a boy and had done something wrong. When was the last time you asked me if I was happy? The question caught him completely off guard. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again like a fish out of water. Well, I just assumed that… When was the last time you invited me out to dinner with you? Silence. When was the last time you considered my opinion on any important decision about the house? More silence. When was the last time you thanked me for something, anything, without it being followed by a request for more help? The silence grew so thick you could cut it with a knife. Mom… Ryan tried to speak, but I held up my hand. Don't answer. I already know the answers. And now that I have a job, now that I have options, now that I can choose where and how to live, I've decided I deserve better. Jessica sat up with difficulty, her eyes shining with tears that could have been real or calculated. Teresa, please. I know we've made mistakes, but we're family, and the baby is coming. Yes, the baby is coming, I confirmed. Your baby, in your house, which you can raise in peace without a bitter old woman breathing nearby. The words she had spat at me weeks ago sounded different coming from my mouth, more controlled, more dangerous. Don't be cruel, Jessica whispered. Cruel? I laughed, but it wasn't a bitter laugh. Cruel is kicking someone out who sold her home to help you. Cruel is treating your mother-in-law like a housekeeper. Cruel is planning to put her in a nursing home without asking her what she wants to do with her life. Ryan turned pale. How do you know about the nursing home? Son, I've lived in this house for 2 years. I've cleaned your bathrooms. I've emptied your trash. I've listened to your conversations when you thought I was asleep. I know a lot of things. They both looked at me as if I had suddenly grown claws and fangs, as if the submissive woman they had known had been replaced by someone unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Mom? Ryan tried a conciliatory smile. I think we're all a little on edge. Why don't we talk tomorrow when we're calmer? Of course. I agreed, gathering my documents. We'll talk tomorrow. I have a lot of interesting things to tell you. I went up to my room, feeling their eyes on my back. For the first time since I'd lived there, I locked the door. A small metallic click that marked the end of an era. The era in which Teresa Morales was a free and inexhaustible resource. The new era had just begun. The family meeting they had promised to talk calmly never happened. Instead, Ryan and Jessica adopted a different strategy. Pretend everything was back to normal while secretly making plans to get rid of me for good. They didn't know that Hugo had taught me to read between the lines, to spot the signs that precede betrayal, to protect myself before the blow landed. The first clue was subtle. Jessica started being overly nice to me, with that forced politeness politicians use before an election. She asked about my job with feigned curiosity, offered me tea when she used to ignore me, and even asked for my advice on decorating the baby's room. Teresa, with your experience decorating homes, what colors do you think would be best for the baby? She asked one morning at breakfast. It was the first time in 2 years she had valued my experience in anything. It depends, I replied. Is it a boy or a girl? We don't know yet. We want it to be a surprise. Then neutral colors. Soft yellow, mint green, off-white. She took notes as if my words were divine revelations, when just weeks ago she had dismissed any suggestion of mine as old-fashioned ideas. But I was no longer the naive woman who could be manipulated by crumbs of fake affection. Hugo had explained how these strategies work. First, they isolate you. Then they soften you up with small kindnesses. And finally, they deliver the decisive blow when your guard is down. The blow came on a Friday afternoon. I had gone out to scout properties in the Pozuelo area for Hugo, and when I returned, I found Ryan waiting for me in the living room with a serious expression. Mom, sit down. We need to talk about something important. I sat in the armchair, the only one I was allowed to sit in because Jessica had declared the large sofa too delicate for daily use. Ryan remained standing, hands in his pockets, like an executive about to fire a troublesome employee. I've been speaking with some lawyers about your situation, he began, using that professional tone he had learned at his job. And it turns out that, legally, you have rights to this house. Here came the trap. I felt it in my gut before he finished speaking. Given that you contributed financially to the purchase, you could claim a proportional stake in the property in case of, well, in case of family problems. Family problems? I repeated. Yes. The lawyer explained that these situations can get very complicated, very costly for everyone. It's often better to resolve them amicably. There it was. The threat disguised as generosity. They were offering me crumbs to voluntarily renounce any rights I might have to the house I had helped buy. What kind of amicable resolution? I asked with feigned innocence. Well, we thought we could compensate you. Financially. A fair amount that would allow you to start your new independent life without legal complications for anyone. How much? $40,000. $40,000. For a house worth over $1 million. For surrendering any claim to the property my money had helped secure. It was a mathematical insult. It's a very generous offer, Ryan continued, misinterpreting my silence. With that amount, you can get a small apartment anywhere. Live comfortably with your Social Security, anywhere. Far from them. Far from my future grandchild. Far from any reminder that I once had a family. And if I don't accept? I asked. His expression hardened slightly. Mom, we don't want this to get unpleasant. Lawyers can be very creative when it comes to protecting their clients' interests. It was a direct threat. My own son was threatening me with a legal battle if I didn't accept his paltry offer. I understand, I said, getting up from the armchair. How much time do I have to decide? A week. The lawyer says it's best to resolve these things quickly, before they get complicated. 1 week. 7 days to accept their elegant blackmail, or face the consequences of having trusted my own flesh and blood. I went up to my room and immediately called Hugo. Teresa, how are you? He answered on the first ring. Hugo, I need to see you. Urgently. Things have happened. Are you okay? Do you want to come to my office or should I pick you up? For the first time in months, someone was concerned about my well-being before asking what I could do for them. I'm on my way, I said. And Hugo, I think it's time to speed up our plans. An hour later, I was in his office telling him about Ryan's proposal, the veiled threats, the 1-week deadline I'd been given to disappear from their lives. Hugo listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes, nodding at the right moments. When I finished, he was quiet for several minutes, looking thoughtful. Teresa, what you've told me changes things. This isn't just business anymore. It's personal. What do you mean? I mean that when someone tries to blackmail my senior consultant, it becomes my problem too. And I don't let people mistreat my team. My team. 2 words that made me feel more valued than 2 years of being family. What do you propose? Hugo smiled, but this time it wasn't the friendly smile of a businessman. It was the smile of a predator that had just found its perfect prey. I propose we show them exactly what your collaboration is worth, and what it costs to disrespect it. He took out his phone and dialed a number. Good afternoon, Weston Town Hall. Planning department, please. Yes, I'd like to report some illegal construction at 23 Almond Street. No, I'm not the owner. I'm a concerned citizen, worried about compliance with municipal codes. I listened as he gave the exact address, described the illegal additions with technical precision, and mentioned the unauthorized conversion of the storage room. Every word was a bomb he was planting under the foundations of the perfect life Ryan and Jessica had built on my sacrifice. When he hung up, he looked at me with satisfaction. Done. The town inspector will be there Monday morning, unannounced, as is the protocol in these cases. And then, my dear Teresa, your son is going to discover that kicking you out of the house was the most expensive decision of his life. I went home that night feeling different. Not better, not worse, just different. As if I had crossed an invisible line and was no longer the same person I had been that morning. We ate dinner in silence. I had cooked, a simple omelet. But for the first time, I didn't automatically get up to serve seconds or clear the plates. I remained seated, eating calmly, while Ryan and Jessica exchanged confused glances. Aren't you going to clear the table? Jessica finally asked. No, I answered simply. I'm tired from work today. From work? What kind of work could be so tiring? She insisted, with that arrogance she had perfected over months. Oh, Technical assessments, detailed reports, coordinating with municipal agencies, I said vaguely. It's a job with a lot of responsibility. I saw Ryan tense up at the words municipal agencies. As an architect, he knew exactly what kind of trouble could arise when local authorities started asking questions about unpermitted construction. Municipal agencies? He repeated, his voice strained. Yes, son. My firm works very closely with the town halls. We share information, coordinate inspections. It's all very official. I let those words hang in the air as I calmly finished my omelet. Then I stood up, washed only my own plate, and wished them good night. Sleep well, I said from the kitchen doorway. Tomorrow is going to be a very interesting day for everyone. I went up to my room and, for the first time in months, fell asleep immediately. No anxiety, no self-reproach, no wondering if I had done something wrong. Because I had finally done something right. I had stopped being a victim. On Monday morning, while they were still asleep, I left the house early to meet with Hugo. I wanted to be far away when the town inspector arrived. But before I left, I placed a note on the kitchen table. Left early for work. If some technicians from the town hall stop by, it's just routine. Don't worry. Teresa. I knew that when they read that note, when they saw the words town hall, they would panic completely. And I was right. The phone started ringing at 10:30 in the morning. I was in Hugo's office, reviewing new urban development projects, when I saw Ryan's name flashing on the screen. I let it ring. He called back immediately. Again, and again. On the fourth try, I decided to answer. Hello? I answered with the calm of someone expecting a routine work call. Mom, the town inspector is here. Ryan's voice was desperate, broken. He says there are irregularities with the house, that they can fine us, that they can make us tear down the additions. Really? I feigned surprise. And what kind of irregularities? Everything. The room you live in, the pergola, the porch. He says none of it has permits, that we've been in violation for years. How strange, I murmured. I thought you had applied for all the necessary permits before doing the renovations. You know we didn't, he yelled, completely losing his composure. You knew we did it without permits because it was cheaper and faster. There it was. The admission of guilt I needed to hear. Ryan, I don't know anything about construction. I lied sweetly. I just lived where you told me to live. Mom, please. We need your help. The inspector says if we don't get everything up to code in 30 days, the fine could be as high as $75,000. We don't have that kind of money. $75,000. The figure had gone up since my conversation with Hugo. Apparently, the municipal authorities had found even more problems than we had initially identified. And what can I do? I asked innocently. I'm just a junior consultant at a real estate firm. Exactly. You work with this stuff. You must know people who can help us. The irony was perfect. The same son who had dismissed me for my age and lack of important responsibilities was now begging me to use my professional contacts to save him. Well, I said slowly, I could talk to my boss, but Hugo is very strict about personal favors. Talk to him, please, he begged. Tell him it's urgent. All right, son. I'll see what I can do. I hung up and turned to Hugo, who had been listening to the conversation with a smirk. Did you hear all that? Every word. Your son just confirmed he was fully aware of the irregularities. That gives us a very strong negotiating position. To negotiate what? The purchase of his house. At a price that reflects the legal troubles they're facing. Hugo opened a financial calculator on his computer and began typing in numbers. Market value, $1 million. Minus the cost to get it up to code, $75,000. Minus the legal risk and procedural stress. Another $50,000. Minus our profit margin. I'd say $700,000 is a very generous offer considering the circumstances. $700,000. $300,000 less than its actual value. But compared to facing fines, legal proceedings, and possible demolitions, it would probably look like a lifesaver to them. And my share? I asked. $50,000, plus your monthly salary until you find your own place. That's more than your son offered you, isn't it? $10,000 more than what Ryan considered fair for my sacrifices. and the dignity of not having to accept handouts from someone who had treated me like dirt. When do we make the offer? Today. But it has to come from you, Teresa, as a caring suggestion from a mother who wants to help her son in trouble. I returned home at 6 that evening. Jessica was crying on the sofa, her hands on her belly, with crumpled tissues scattered all around her. Ryan was pacing the living room like a caged animal, his hair disheveled and his shirt wrinkled. "You're finally here!" Jessica cried out as soon as she saw me. "We've been going out of our minds all day." "Did you talk to your boss?" Ryan asked immediately. "Can he help us?" I sat in my armchair and sighed as if I were delivering difficult news. "I spoke with Hugo. I explained the situation. And he says the problems are very serious, that the town has been cracking down on illegal construction lately." I saw Jessica turn even paler. Her tears began to fall harder. "But," I continued, "he says there might be a solution." "What is it?" they both asked in unison. "His company sometimes buys properties with legal issues. They bring them up to code using their contacts and expertise, and then they redevelop or resell them. He would buy our house?" Ryan asked with a mix of hope and humiliation. "Possibly, but it would have to be at a price that reflects the problems. He couldn't pay full market value for a property with serious code violations." "How much?" Jessica whispered. $700,000. Cash. A quick closing. Ryan sank onto the sofa as if his legs could no longer support him. That's $300,000 less than what the house is worth." "Yes," I confirmed. "But it's $700,000 more than what it would be worth after the fines and legal proceedings." The truth of that statement hit them like a hammer. Without my suggestion, they would face financial ruin. With my help, they would come out bruised, but alive. "We need to think about it," Ryan mumbled. "Of course. But Hugo said the offer is only good for this week. After that, with the publicity the inspections will generate, it will be much harder to find a buyer." That night, for the first time since I moved into that house, I didn't cook dinner for them. I ordered a pizza just for myself and ate it in my room while I read. I could hear them arguing in the living room, their voices rising and falling like the tide, a mix of mutual blame and a desperate search for alternatives that didn't exist. The next day, Ryan came to my room before he left for work. He had deep dark circles under his eyes and his clothes were wrinkled, as if he hadn't slept at all. "Mom, would your boss, Hugo, be willing to meet with us?" "What for?" "To discuss the possibility of the purchase." "Are you sure?" "It's a very important decision. We have no choice," he admitted, and those 4 words gave me more satisfaction than any apology he could have offered. "All right, I'll talk to him." When Ryan left for work, Jessica approached me in the kitchen. Her eyes were red from crying, and for the first time she looked vulnerable. Human. "Teresa," she said in a broken voice, "I know I've been difficult with you, but the baby is coming, and we need stability. Can your boss really help us?" "He can," I confirmed. "But Jessica, I want you to understand something." "What?" "The consequences have a price, and the price for treating people badly is sometimes higher than you expect to pay." She looked at me with a mixture of fear and something that might have been respect. For the first time since I'd known her, Jessica was learning that I was not harmless. I was the woman who held the future of her family in her hands, and that woman no longer had anything to lose. The meeting was set for Friday. Hugo would come to the house, meet my dear family, and make them an offer they couldn't refuse. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming indispensable to those who considered you disposable. Friday arrived like a gathering storm. Hugo appeared at 5 o'clock sharp, driving a black BMW that gleamed under the November sun like a promise of prosperity. He wore an impeccable navy blue suit and carried a leather briefcase that screamed authority from the moment he walked through the door. Ryan and Jessica were waiting for him in the living room, dressed as if for a job interview. He was in his best white shirt and a blue tie. She wore a black maternity dress that tried to project professional seriousness, but couldn't hide her extreme nervousness. I introduced them with the calm of someone in complete control of the situation. "Hugo, I'd like you to meet my son, Ryan, and his wife, Jessica. Guys, this is Hugo Vance, my boss and the director of urban development at Peninsula Realty." The handshakes were tense. Hugo surveyed the house with a professional eye, taking notes on a tablet as he walked through the rooms, pointing out every structural problem I had described in our previous meetings. "Nice property," he finally commented, sitting on the main sofa as if he owned the place. "Although I see a few details that would need attention." "Yes," Ryan mumbled. "The town inspector informed us of some minor issues." "Minor?" Hugo raised an eyebrow. "According to the report I have here, we're talking about at least 4 serious violations of the municipal building code." He pulled a thick folder from his briefcase and placed it on the coffee table. Official documents, photos from the inspection, detailed calculations of the potential fines. Jessica choked back a sob when she saw the figures. $75,000 in fines alone, Hugo read aloud, plus the costs to bring it up to code, which we estimate at another $30,000, plus the legal fees to defend yourselves if the town decides to take you to court. "Court?" Jessica stammered. "They can take us to court?" "Of course. Unpermitted construction is a serious civil offense. In some cases, it can even involve criminal liability." I watched Ryan put his head in his hands. His perfect world, built on shortcuts and cheap decisions, was crumbling exactly as I had planned. "But," Hugo continued in a magnanimous tone, "my company specializes in resolving these problems. We have contacts in town halls all over the state. We can make these problems disappear." "How?" Ryan asked with the desperation of a drowning man clinging to a piece of driftwood. "By purchasing the property. We assume all the legal risks. You walk away from the problem and we handle the permitting and construction using our resources and contacts." "And what are you offering us?" Jessica whispered. Hugo pretended to consult his documents, though I knew he'd had the number decided for days. "Considering the legal issues, the cost of remediation, and the business risk we're assuming, $650,000. Cash." A quick closing. The silence that followed was deafening. $650,000. A staggering amount less than the house's market value. A figure that would leave them wounded but not dead, punished but not destroyed. That's very low," Ryan protested weakly. "It's the market price for a property with serious legal liabilities," Hugo replied with professional firmness. "Any other buyer would offer you less, or they wouldn't take the risk at all. Is there any room to negotiate?" Jessica tried. Hugo glanced at his watch as if time were money. "The offer is valid until Sunday at 6 p.m. After that, once the town files a formal complaint, it will be much more complicated for everyone." He stood up from the sofa and gathered his documents with efficient movements. "Teresa, are you coming? We have other properties to look at this afternoon." "Of course," I replied, picking up my purse. "Ryan, Jessica, think it over. It's a good offer, under the circumstances." I left them there, sitting in their perfect living room, surrounded by the expensive furniture they had bought with money they would now need to pay off their losses. I didn't go back to the house to sleep that night. Hugo had arranged a room for me at a discreet hotel in downtown Boston, claiming I needed to be available for business emergencies. In reality, he wanted Ryan and Jessica to spend the most agonizing weekend of their lives without being able to pressure me directly. On Saturday morning, my phone exploded with desperate messages. Ryan. "Mom, please come back. We need to talk." Jessica. "Teresa, I'm so nervous. The stress isn't good for the baby." Ryan again. "I spoke with other lawyers. They said your boss's offer is our best option." Jessica. "Please don't abandon us now. You're all we have. You're all we have." How quickly I had gone from being an annoying old woman to being all they had. I returned to the house on Sunday afternoon. I found them in the kitchen, with deep, dark circles under their eyes and expressions of total defeat. The table was covered in legal documents, calculators, and the remains of fast food they had ordered because they didn't know how to cook without me. "Mom." Ryan stood up when he saw me walk in. "We've decided to accept the offer." "Are you sure?" I asked. "It's a very important decision. We have no choice," Jessica admitted. "Without your help, we'd be ruined." Without my help. The same woman who had spat at me to get out now acknowledged that without me, they were lost. "All right," I said. "I'll call Hugo to prepare the paperwork." But before dialing his number, I sat down at the kitchen table where we had eaten together for 2 years. where I had served thousands of meals they consumed without gratitude, where Jessica had informed me of my eviction as if I were a fired employee. Before Hugo comes, I want to talk about something. What is it? Ryan asked impatiently. About where I'm going to live after the sale. They looked at each other, confused. Well, you'll look for an apartment with your share of the money, Jessica said as if it were obvious. My share? I feigned surprise. What share? Well, something fair. For your initial contribution. Ah, so now you acknowledge I made a contribution? Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Mom, of course you contributed. We never said you didn't. Didn't you? Didn't you tell me 2 weeks ago that I didn't pay rent, as if my $23,000 were a worthless gift? That was a misunderstanding. And didn't you, Jessica, tell me to get out because this house was yours? That I wasn't real family? Jessica started crying again, but this time her tears seemed more like crocodile tears than genuine pain. I was upset because of the pregnancy. I didn't know what I was saying. I understand, I said with deadly calm. So, now that you need my help to save your assets, I'm family again. Teresa, please. Jessica begged. You know we love you. We just want everyone to be okay. Perfect. I smiled. Then you'll be delighted to know that Hugo has already found me a beautiful apartment in the North End, near my old place. A second-floor unit with a balcony and lots of light. You're going to live alone? Ryan asked. Yes. Just like you wanted. I'm going to live where I won't be in anyone's way, where my presence won't be an inconvenience, where no one has to tolerate a bitter old woman. Mom, we never… Ryan, I cut him off firmly. You said exactly that, and now you're going to get exactly what you asked for. Your house, your privacy, your perfect family. Without me. And the baby? Jessica whispered. Don't you want to meet your grandchild? That question hurt more than all the previous humiliations. Because yes, I wanted to meet my grandchild. I wanted to be there for his first steps. I wanted to teach him how to bake cookies. I wanted him to call me grandma with genuine affection. But I had learned that wanting something didn't mean accepting any conditions to get it. If you want me to be a part of the baby's life, I told them, it will be on my terms. With respect. With explicit invitations. As the grandmother I am. Not as the free maid I was. Of course, they both rushed to say. Perfect, I smiled. Then I'll call Hugo to close the deal. I dialed his number in front of them, putting the call on speaker so they could hear the entire conversation. Hugo, they're ready to sign. Can you come over this afternoon with the contracts? Excellent, Teresa. I'll be there in 2 hours with everything ready. When I hung up, Ryan and Jessica looked at me as if they had just realized I was no longer the submissive woman they had known. Mom, Ryan said in a small voice, are you really leaving? Yes, son, I'm leaving, just like you asked. But now, instead of leaving defeated and humiliated, I'm leaving with dignity and resources. Do you forgive us? Jessica asked. The question hung in the air between us, an opportunity for redemption that had come far too late. I forgive you, I said finally, but forgiveness doesn't erase the consequences. At 7 o'clock, Hugo rang the doorbell with the contracts ready to be signed.